The sun poured down like gold over the glittering towers of Emerald Heights, the city's most luxurious district. Among the skyline's crown jewel stood Lux Veritas Tower, a 72-story masterpiece of modern glass, chrome, and quiet exclusivity. Its floors were lined with marble imported from Italy, scented with the finest air fresheners from Dubai, and populated by the wealthiest names in fashion, tech, and finance. But beneath the glitz, under the surface of that perfect polish, there was something ugly. It wore gray overalls, pushed a squeaky mop cart, and was invisible to nearly everyone who lived there. They called him the janitor, when they acknowledged him at all. But his real name was Theo Baxter, and unknown to the tenants, the name Theo Baxter was once whispered at boardrooms across London, Lagos, and Singapore. He had been a billionaire, an empire builder, a name on front covers. Now he was a ghost in his own building. By choice. Today he mopped the 48th floor hallway, pausing occasionally to scrape away a scuff mark. The hallway overlooked a private rooftop garden used only by the richest of the rich. Theo didn't mind. He was watching. Observing. That's when it happened. A door slammed open behind him. Click-clack, click-clack. Heels stabbed the marble like bullets. Theo turned just slightly and saw Veronica Lancaster, a digital influencer with 27 million followers and an attitude larger than life. Ugh, seriously? She snapped, eyeing the mop bucket. You people are always in the way. Move your trash. Theo, silent, bowed his head slightly and shifted the bucket. Veronica sneered. Disgusting, she muttered as she passed. You smell like poverty. She walked off, phone in hand, live-streaming herself in a filter with bunny ears. Theo didn't react. But inside, he had taken a mental note. Not of her insult. Of her heart. And she had failed the test. Behind him, another resident, a man in a linen blazer with a tiny dog in a designer bag, scrunched up his nose as he passed Theo. You'd think they'd at least hire someone who doesn't look like a prison escapee, the man said, tossing a half-eaten croissant onto Theo's cart. Oops. Clean it up. No one knew who Theo really was. That he owned the building, the land beneath it, and half the equity of the startup that man's girlfriend was trying to pitch next door. But soon they would know. Theo looked up slowly, catching a glimpse of his reflection in the mirrored wall. Gray beard, thick eyebrows, a tired expression. And in his eyes, something deeper. Purpose. He pulled out a small notebook from his back pocket. In it, he wrote a single name. Veronica. Failed. And another. Lucas. Failed. Then he turned to page 2, where only one name sat alone. Mila, floor 3 cafe. Possible. Suddenly, the elevator dinged behind him. He turned, expecting another rude face. But instead, he saw Mila. She smiled kindly. I brought you coffee, she said, holding out a paper cup. It's raining. Thought you might be cold. Theo blinked. Nobody had offered him anything in weeks. He took the cup. And that's when he knew. This building would never be the same again. Because soon he'd start making decisions. And they had no idea what was coming. On the very top of Lux Veritas Tower, above the noise of the city and the lives of the people below, sat a penthouse made entirely of smart glass. It could turn transparent or opaque with a whisper. The ceiling sparkled with tiny imported crystal lights that mimicked constellations. The floors were polished marble. The walls voice-activated. The wardrobe, nothing short of a fashion museum. This was the kingdom of Veronica Lancaster. She wasn't born rich. She built her name through modeling, then influencing, then full-blown lifestyle branding. But what she lacked in humility, she made up for in spectacle. This morning, as the city yawned into life, Veronica was already filming a video from her walk-in closet. Day in my life as a penthouse queen, she cooed into her phone, smoothing her platinum blonde hair. Let's go yell at the concierge because my matcha arrived lukewarm again. Like, what is this prison? Thousands of viewers watched her every move. Downstairs, the lobby buzzed with guests arriving for a networking brunch hosted in the lounge. Entrepreneurs, actors, and a minor royal or two filled the air with perfume and power. The concierge wore gloves. The security guards stood taller than usual. And in the middle of it all was Theo, emptying trash from the gold-accented bins, unnoticed by most, except her. Veronica glided in wearing a silk red dress that swirled like a flame. She passed a group of guests near the espresso bar, laughing loudly, until her eyes landed on Theo. Oh my God, she said, loud enough for the room to hear. Why is the janitor dragging a trash bag through my lobby event? Heads turned. Theo paused, then kept moving. Veronica waved dramatically. Excuse me? This is not a back alley. You're dripping something. Can someone move him? Honestly, I can smell sewer water. The crowd laughed. One man filmed the scene on his phone. Another giggled behind a champagne glass. Theo didn't look up. He simply nodded and moved on. Veronica rolled her eyes. Honestly, this is why I never do events in shared buildings. I'm going to talk to the board. He should not be visible when important people are here. The concierge stood frozen behind the desk. No one said anything. Veronica, satisfied, turned to her guests and said with a smirk, "Apologies for the interruption. Let's go upstairs where it doesn't smell like a toilet." Laughter followed her into the private elevator. Theo walked to the service closet, pulled off his gloves, and exhaled deeply. He opened his notebook again. Veronica confirmed. He looked up at the security camera in the corner of the lobby and gave a knowing nod. Inside his hidden office, footage was already being saved. Audio captured. Evidence filed. But while Veronica played the star, there was another reality waiting to burst. One that wouldn't look good with filters. In truth, Veronica had received 2 default warnings from her bank. Her luxury brand was bleeding money. Her last campaign had flopped. But none of that showed in her daily videos. She was living on rented sparkle. And Theo knew it. Later that evening, as the city lights blinked like jewels outside her glass walls, Veronica stood with a wine glass in hand, practicing her TED Talk for a future that might never come. "I built myself from the ground up," she whispered to the glass, posing with her reflection. "Unlike others, I earned this." Down below, Theo looked out a different window, quiet, alone, and still holding her words in his ears. She had passed the lobby test. But not in the way she thought. The rooftop was dressed in fairy lights, clinking glasses, and the high laughter of people who never checked their bank balances. Emerald Heights at night was a sea of diamonds, and standing at the center of it all was Dax Moore, a fashion designer whose cruelty had long become part of his charm. Dax wasn't the type to whisper. He performed every word like it was runway ready. His voice bounced off glass walls and egos alike. He wore a long black trench coat, half-buttoned to show his waxed chest, and a ridiculous pair of sunglasses even though it was nearly 10 p.m. Tonight, he was hosting what he called a minimalist fashion soiree. Invitations had been sent only to tenants of Lux Veritas Tower with a verified net worth. There were signature cocktails named after his latest collection. He had even turned the rooftop pool into a runway with plexiglass sheets laid across the surface. It was all very Dax, bold, expensive, and empty. Theo was called up to clear a spill, near the bar just before the models walked. He arrived with his mop and gloves, careful not to interrupt the flow of champagne or celebrity gossip. The music was low jazz, the kind rich people claimed to enjoy but never really listened to. A waiter brushed past him muttering, "Hurry up. He's watching you." Indeed, Dax stood at the edge of the runway, sunglasses still on, holding a martini and already annoyed. Theo mopped quickly and turned to leave. But Dax stopped him with a single word, sharp as glass. "Wait." Theo paused. "Who let this man on my runway?" Dax said, pointing. A few heads turned. Then a few more. The music didn't stop, but the mood dipped, like a dropped thread in expensive fabric. Theo said nothing. "You smell like an oil rag," Dax added, wrinkling his nose. "Honestly, I've had interns who look more presentable. Did you even wash your hands before coming up here?" The laughter this time wasn't just awkward. It was ugly. Dax walked up to him. "You're dripping on a custom Balenciaga carpet, darling. That's not water safe." Theo looked down. The floor was clean. But Dax wasn't mocking him because of a spill. He was performing, establishing a hierarchy. Still, Theo gave him a slow nod and backed away. "Oh, and one more thing," Dax said, stopping him with a smile as fake as his cheekbones. "Next time wear gloves and a muzzle." Some laughed. Some winced. A few simply sipped their drinks, too cowardly to speak. Later, Dax returned to his group, satisfied. "Trash shouldn't be allowed to walk among couture," he said, as if he'd just solved poverty with a snarky comment. Theo returned to the service elevator in silence. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He didn't get angry. He wrote. Dax Moore failed. Then he slid the notebook into his pocket and turned on his old phone, the one connected to the building's private surveillance system. Every insult, every cruelty, every word was already saved. Because what no one knew, what no one cared to know, was that Theo once funded Dax's first boutique before the designer became famous. The original seed money had come from a mysterious silent investor no one had ever identified. Now that investor was mopping his floors and watching him closely. Back on the rooftop, Dax's laughter echoed into the night. But far below, in a hidden office that didn't appear on the blueprints, Theo checked a second list. Tenants to remove. Dax's name had just made the top 5. And the list was growing. The next morning, the third-floor hallway smelled of warm croissants, freshly ground coffee, and a hint of cinnamon. It was the only floor in Lux Veritas Tower that didn't feel cold. Not because of the temperature, but because of Mila. Her cafe, Cafe Level 3, was a tiny spot tucked between a yoga studio and a luxury watch repair service. While the other tenants sold status, Mila sold comfort. She wore her curls in a messy bun, always had a pen behind her ear, and greeted everyone with a smile. Yes, even Theo. Theo passed by her cafe twice every morning, once while collecting the trash and again to check the fire exit. Every day, Mila would offer a nod or a small wave. But today was different. He had just finished emptying the trash bin outside the studio when Mila stepped out, holding a brown paper bag and a coffee cup. "Hey, Mr. Theo," she said. He paused. Most people didn't use his name. "I had extra pastries. Want a sandwich? And coffee's hot. Don't worry, it's not the cheap stuff," she said with a grin. Theo took a moment before replying. "Thank you. No problem. I see you here every day, cleaning after everyone. Figured someone should be decent to you." He took the items slowly, as if unsure whether to accept them. But Mila just smiled and walked back into the cafe, already joking with the next customer. Theo leaned against the wall and took a bite of the sandwich. Egg, tomato, and melted cheese. Real cheese. The kind people didn't usually spare for janitors. No camera watched. No applause followed. But the gesture meant more than anything Dax or Veronica had ever said with their $1,000 words. That afternoon, a tenant walked past him on the same floor, rolling her eyes. "Didn't know they were letting in beggars now," she muttered. He said nothing. Later, as he rested in the janitor's closet with a small fan blowing on his face, Theo opened his notebook. Under Veronica and Dax's names, marked in thick black ink, he added a new line in careful script. "Mila, kindness without audience. Possible." Then beneath it he wrote again. "Watch closely." Because it wasn't just kindness once that counted. It was how someone treated others when no one was watching. He would test her again. Meanwhile, in his hidden office 2 floors underground, screens flickered. Cameras from every hallway, every common space, even the elevator lounges showed Theo everything. He wasn't watching to punish. He was watching to understand. His notebook now held 5 failed names. One maybe. He sipped the rest of Mila's coffee, which had gone lukewarm. Still better than anything he'd had in weeks. And that's when the private elevator dinged. Not the public one. The private one, only accessible through a key card known by 2 people. The original architect of Lux Veritas and Theo himself. He closed his notebook and rose to his feet. Someone was approaching the part of the building no one should have known existed. It seemed the next test was arriving sooner than expected. The metal door creaked slightly as Theo stepped into the restricted hallway on level 2B. He had designed this floor to be invisible, sandwiched between the gym level and the archive room, accessible only by a private elevator that didn't appear on the digital panel unless the right keycard was used. Whoever had triggered it wasn't supposed to be here. Theo moved calmly but quickly, his steps practiced and quiet. His overalls, stained and faded, brushed softly against the polished cement floor. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, then steadied. The walls were bare, no room numbers, no signage. He approached the door at the end of the hall and placed his hand on the biometric panel. A green light blinked once. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside was a completely different world. The room was sleek and modern, with soundproof walls, imported hardwood floors, and floor-to-ceiling monitors lining the walls. At the center was a large desk made of reclaimed Italian oak, with Theo's personal laptop, 3 file drawers, and a drawer filled with dozens of tenant dossiers. He shut the door behind him. No one was there. He moved to the security feed and rewound the footage. The elevator had opened, but no one had stepped out. Whoever had triggered it had backed out quickly. A warning. Or a mistake. He zoomed in on the timestamp. 10:43 a.m. Only one resident had used their keycard around that time. Veronica Lancaster. Theo narrowed his eyes. She shouldn't have access to that elevator. Not unless someone had given her an override card, or she had found one. He checked the logs again. There it was. Veronica's card had pinged the private system once, then disappeared. Strange. He pressed a few keys and locked the elevator's override function entirely. For now, no one would be able to access level 2B, not even with a MasterCard. Then, he opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a leather folder marked Tenant Watch List. He flipped to Veronica's page. In bold red ink, he wrote, Attempted access. Escalating behavior. He closed the folder and turned to one of the wall monitors. A camera feed from the rooftop lounge appeared. Dax was in the hot tub, laughing with two influencers, holding a glass of wine. Another screen showed Mila in her cafe, handing a small cup of tea to an elderly tenant in a wheelchair. She helped her into a seat, then sat beside her for a few moments. No cameras nearby. No audience. Real kindness. Theo watched silently. Then he leaned forward and tapped a few keys, opening a document titled, Property Repossession Protocols, 90-Day Timeline. A list of tenants loaded, each with markers beside their names. Veronica Lancaster, red. A Dax Moore, red. A Lucas and Jamie, Unit 34F, red. Mila Noakes, Floor 3 Cafe, yellow. A Dr. Asim Bundari, Unit 17C, green. Only a few had green markers. Most were red. He exhaled. This building was never meant to be a castle for the cruel. When Theo built it 5 years ago, he wanted to create a haven for creativity, community, and collaboration. But the vultures had moved in. One luxury Instagram post at a time. He had been silent too long. The experiments were working. The data was clear. Now came the decisions. He locked the screens, reset the biometric panel, and disappeared back into the elevator. The janitor would reappear upstairs, right where people expected to see him, sweeping dust in the lobby, cleaning fingerprints off glass doors, nodding politely to those who never learned his name. But tonight, someone had tried to find the truth. And soon more would come looking. He just hoped they were ready for what they'd find. The next morning was unusually tense in the lobby. Theo sensed it the moment he stepped in through the side entrance with his cleaning cart. The concierge was stiffer than usual. Security guards paced near the main elevators with quiet radios clipped to their suits. Veronica stood near the fountain, pacing in 6-inch heels, talking into her phone with a tone laced in panic. But she wasn't live streaming for once. Something was shifting. Theo moved toward the elevator to begin his usual rounds when the doors opened, and 3 familiar faces stepped inside with him. Lucas and Jamie from 34F, and their friend Tiffany, 3 of the loudest and most entitled tenants in the building. Lucas was in a pale linen suit with no shirt underneath. Jamie wore sunglasses indoors, and Tiffany clutched her tiny dog like it was an accessory. The moment the doors slid closed, they began to talk. Loudly. Carelessly. Did you hear? Tiffany whispered too loudly. Someone tried to break into the server floor or whatever. The one with no number. Yeah, Lucas snorted. I bet it's some creepy underground wine vault. Probably full of Theo's old trash. They all laughed. Theo said nothing. He was standing at the back, pressing the mop handle into the corner. Honestly, Jamie chimed in. I don't know why they haven't just replaced that guy. I saw him staring at people through the glass like a serial killer last week. I mean, what kind of janitor doesn't smile? Tiffany leaned close to the elevator panel. Maybe he lives in the walls or something. Like a rat in overalls. Another round of giggles. Then came the kicker. Anyway, Lucas said, I ran the numbers with my accountant. If we just route our shares through that shell firm in Monaco, we can avoid like 80% of taxes. Just gotta keep things quiet. Don't want the building's board sniffing around. Jamie nodded. Genius. You're wasted on real estate. Theo's face didn't move, but his ears caught every word. They weren't just arrogant. They were breaking the law. As the elevator neared their floor, Tiffany turned to Theo. Oh, by the way, she said, fake sweet. There's a disgusting smell in the hallway outside our unit. You should check it out before we complain. To like someone who matters. Ding. They stepped off, still laughing, still completely unaware. The doors closed again. Theo didn't press a button. He let the elevator ride all the way up to the top. When the doors opened again, he stepped out onto the empty penthouse hallway, Veronica's floor. And without hesitation, he pulled out his notebook. Under Lucas and Jamie's names, he wrote, Fraud. Arrogance. No empathy. Then a star beside Tiffany's name. Malicious follower. No moral compass. And beneath that, he scribbled something new. Red level alert. Audit required. That night, in the hidden office, Theo filed a report to his legal counsel. Discreetly, quietly. He had already suspected shady financials from some tenants, but now he had the proof to begin full investigations. The janitor wasn't just cleaning floors. He was sweeping out corruption. Meanwhile, Mila had posted a handwritten sign on the cafe wall. Free coffee for delivery drivers and building staff today. Thank you for everything you do. Theo saw it on the security feed, right before closing his laptop for the night. In his notebook, he wrote one more thing. Mila passed her second test. But the night wasn't over. A message blinked onto the private server screen. A breach attempt. Someone was trying to access the tower's central control system from outside the building. Theo leaned closer. Veronica's name flashed on the monitor. This wasn't just entitlement anymore. It was war. Theo didn't panic. He didn't even blink. He simply stood from his desk, cracked his neck once, and began typing. The soft blue glow of the monitors lit up the edges of his sharp jawline, casting shadows on the wall behind him. The system logs confirmed it. A remote attempt to breach the central controls. IP address partially masked, the activity routed through a temporary VPN server in Dubai. But Theo's system was built by military-grade cybersecurity engineers. It wasn't just a smart building, it was a fortress disguised as a hotel. And now, someone was trying to get inside the brain of it all. He traced the origin to a luxury condo not in Lux Veritas Tower, but across the street in Pinnacle 8, a rival building full of minor celebrities and brand marketers desperate to get into Theo's tower. Why would Veronica be accessing it from there? Unless she was working with someone else. Someone who knew there was more to the janitor than a mop. Theo killed the signal, encrypted the entry point, and redirected the hacker to a fake server filled with nonsense files. Pictures of floor plans from 1995, a non-existent spa reservation system, and a dummy staff payroll. Then he set up a trace. In less than 20 seconds, the real identity behind the hack flickered on screen. Frederick Turner, IT consultant alias, Fred Lancaster, Veronica's cousin. He smirked. This was more than curiosity now. Veronica was actively trying to figure out who ran the building behind the scenes. She was making moves. But what she didn't realize was that the moment she stepped foot in Lux Veritas, she had walked into a test. And she was failing hard. Theo stood and walked to the far corner of the office, where a steel cabinet sat behind a sliding panel. He unlocked it with a key he wore around his neck, the only thing of value left from his past life he kept on him. Inside was a thick brown folder labeled Founders Charter, Lux Veritas. It detailed a little-known clause, the power to revoke tenancy without board vote, if the owner could prove a tenant had violated ethics clauses in their contract 3 times. Veronica already had 6. He sat down and scribbled a quick internal memo, time-stamped and saved on the secure drive. To self. From Baxter Holdings Internal Control. Initiate silent review process on Veronica Lancaster, Fred Turner, and all affiliated connections. Review all digital activity, lease agreements, and cross-reference business accounts. End goal, full removal within 45 days. He closed the file and looked up at the monitor. On one of the camera feeds, Mila was cleaning up her cafe for the night. She was alone, wiping down tables herself after sending her only staff member home early. She had left 2 sandwiches outside the door labeled Staff Access Only, with a note that read, For whoever works harder than we see. You're not invisible. Theo stared at the note longer than he should have. That sandwich meant more to him than any of the fake designer parties happening 10 floors above. But just as he was about to shut the screen, something caught his eye. Veronica had just entered the lobby. Alone. Dressed in black. No phone. No entourage. And she wasn't heading to her penthouse. She was walking toward the service elevator. Theo's service elevator. He stood up, eyes narrowing, and watched as she scanned the panel, pressed a series of buttons, and to his shock, typed a short code that only a few staff knew. The doors slid open. She stepped inside. Theo turned, left the office, and walked out into the hallway leading to the elevator shaft. He moved fast. Not in panic. In precision. Veronica had found a crack in the system. Or someone had given it to her. By the time she reached level 2B, he was already waiting in the shadows near the electrical panel. The doors opened with a soft ding. She stepped out slowly, heels clicking against the cement. Her eyes scanned the hallway. Empty. No signage. Just sterile walls and a faint humming sound from the power conduits. Hello, she called out. Theo stepped forward. She jumped, startled. I thought this was the laundry level, she said, eyes narrowing. What are you doing here? He tilted his head. Shouldn't I be asking you that, Miss Lancaster? She frowned. You don't talk. That's your thing. I talk when I need to, Theo replied, voice calm low. She stepped back, the first flicker of doubt crossing her face. This is just a basement, she said, trying to recover her usual sharp tone. I made a mistake. I'll leave. But Theo stepped forward once more. No mistake. You've been digging. Veronica's eyes narrowed. You think I don't know what's going on here? People talk. You don't belong. And I'm going to find out who's really running this place. Theo gave a slight smile. Good, he said. Because I was wondering when someone would finally ask the right question. The lights above flickered once. Then the hallway fell silent. Veronica turned, panic creeping into her voice. What is this? Are you threatening me? But Theo simply reached into his pocket, pulled out his notebook, and scribbled one word under her name. Accelerate. And then, with a calmness that unsettled her more than any scream could have, he said, Be careful, Miss Lancaster. You might just get the answers you're not ready to hear. The elevator opened behind her. She backed into it, breathing hard. As the doors slid shut, her eyes stayed locked on his. And Theo was already turning back to the shadows. Because the tests were over. Now came the consequences. The next few days at Lux Veritas Tower were deceptively calm, on the surface. The lobby returned to its usual marble glass silence, filled with the scent of imported lilies and expensive colognes. Elevators dinged politely. Luxury cars glided into the underground garage like whispers. The tenants returned to their routines, yoga classes, rooftop brunches, whispered backroom deals. But beneath that stillness, something had changed. Veronica didn't speak to anyone. She had stopped live streaming altogether. Rumors trickled through the tower. She'd been seen screaming on her phone one night in the parking garage, clutching her tablet like it had betrayed her. Daxmore hosted another rooftop event, this time a fashion for the forgotten party, supposedly to raise awareness for factory workers he couldn't even name. A PR move. Theo watched it all from his monitors and said nothing. But the real story was unfolding quietly, inside a cafe on floor 3. Mila was about to be tested again. It started with something small. A woman named Margot, who lived in Unit 6B, stormed into Cafe Level 3 one afternoon with rage in her eyes. I asked for oat milk, she snapped, slamming her to-go cup on the counter. Do you know how important that is to my digestion? Mila looked up, calm as ever. I'm so sorry. Let me fix it right away. Margot snorted. You people get one job and still mess it up. Theo was sitting in the corner booth, unnoticed, wiping down a nearby glass panel. He watched. Mila handed her a new cup with a soft smile. No charge. Again, I'm really sorry. Margot didn't even say thank you. She just stormed out, sloshing the drink down the hallway. Later that day, Mila found a cruel review online. 1 star, riddled with lies, posted under a burner account. But Theo traced the IP address within minutes. It was Margot. He logged it silently and added her to the watch list. But Mila did something surprising. Instead of lashing out or begging her regulars to defend her, she left a calm reply. Hi Margot, I understand your frustration. It was a mistake, and I've taken steps to prevent it happening again. If you ever want to talk, I'm always here. That evening, a food delivery driver arrived, soaking wet from a surprise thunderstorm. He looked miserable, drenched, shivering, and clearly on his last run for the day. The front desk wouldn't even let him use the lobby bathrooms. Mila saw him standing outside her cafe window, staring at the pastries. Without hesitation, she stepped outside with a warm croissant and a steaming cup of chai. You look like you need this more than I do, she said, smiling. He nearly cried. Theo watched it all, unseen from behind the cleaning cart nearby. Later that night, in his private office, he flipped open the notebook. Mila, 3rd test passed. Integrity in public and private. Compassion under pressure. He leaned back in the chair and stared at the name for a while. Then, for the first time in weeks, he added something new beneath her file. Candidate for elevation. He opened a second folder, marked in gold. Inside were sealed envelopes. Contracts. Legal rights. Property titles. A program he had written years ago called Project Inheritance. The idea had been simple: observe the tenants. Learn who they really were. Identify those whose values matched the building's founding charter, and slowly give them access. Not just to rooms or floors, but to ownership. The right people would be offered partnership. Real stake in the future. Everyone else? Removed. Silently. Legally. That was the plan. And Mila was the first name shortlisted. But there was no time to celebrate. Because at that very moment, an emergency alert flashed on the central server screen. Someone was accessing Unit 14C. A unit that had been sealed for 5 years. A unit no one knew existed on paper. It was Theo's private archive. His vault. Only one person had the means to get close. And the motive. Veronica. Theo stood up instantly, heart racing. Not from fear, but from calculation. If she got into that room, everything could unravel. His records, his legal documents, his journals, all tied to his identity as the real owner of Lux Veritas Tower. He grabbed his master key, stepped into the elevator, and hit a hidden panel behind the control screen. The elevator jolted to life and began descending, past the marked floors, into the darkness of level 14. The lights flickered. The secrets were no longer safe. And when he reached the door, he saw it ajar. Light spilling into the hallway. She was already inside. Theo moved swiftly but silently, the soles of his work boots soundless against the polished concrete floor. The corridor leading to Unit 14C felt different, charged, tense. He hadn't stepped foot in this section in over 3 years. It wasn't even listed on the building's official floor plans. But Veronica had found it. Or someone had shown her. He reached the door and paused. It was fully open now. A single warm light glowed from inside, casting long shadows on the walls. He could see the edge of the mahogany desk, the same one he'd once used as his base of operations before creating the hidden office on level 2B. He stepped inside. And there she was, Veronica Lancaster, standing in front of his private vault, holding one of his old journals. Her lips were slightly parted. Her hair was tied up, different from her usual styled waves. She looked stunned, not arrogant. Not dramatic. Stunned. She turned slowly as he entered. "You," she whispered, the journal trembling in her hands. "You're not just the janitor." Theo didn't move. He simply looked at her, steady, controlled. She glanced down at the notebook again. "Theo Batste, founder of Baxter Holdings. You disappeared 7 years ago. The papers said you had a mental breakdown. But you're here. And you own this building." He didn't answer. She was holding the truth in her hands. The pages of the journal were filled with handwritten notes, plans, architectural sketches, lists of tenants, meeting transcripts. His past life, recorded in ink. "You've been watching us," she continued, breathless now. "All of us. Judging us like lab rats. For what? Entertainment? Revenge?" Theo took a step forward. "For truth." She laughed bitterly. "Truth? Is that what you call this? Hiding in closets and eavesdropping while pretending to scrub toilets." "I didn't pretend," he said calmly. "I became the janitor. Not because I had to. Because I needed to understand the people I was building a future with." Her eyes narrowed. "And what if someone exposed you?" He shrugged. "Then the truth would come out sooner than I planned." She clutched the journal tighter. "This is a violation. People have rights, Theo." He studied her. "You're worried about rights now?" She flushed, eyes flashing with guilt, then quickly masking it again. Theo looked at her, not just as a tenant or an influencer or a nuisance, but as a person who had failed every single test. Not because she was flawed, but because she had never even tried to be decent when no one was watching. "You're not stupid, Veronica," he said. "But you think cleverness is power. That your charm can buy forgiveness. I gave everyone in this building chances. Quiet ones. You used every one of yours to step on others." She took a step toward him. "Then just evict me already. If that's what you want." Theo raised a brow. "You think this is about eviction?" She blinked. "It's about access," he said softly. "To opportunity. Legacy. This tower was meant to be more than a luxury nest for the loud and wealthy. I built this to house future leaders. Innovators. People with compassion. People like Mila." At the mention of her name, something flickered in Veronica's eyes. Jealousy? Regret? He reached out his hand. "Give me the journal." She stared at it, then at him. A long, tense pause. And finally, she handed it over. Theo returned it to the safe behind the bookcase, locked it, then turned to her one last time. "You're not being thrown out today," he said. "But you will be watched. Closely." Veronica clenched her jaw. "You think this is over?" Theo's voice dropped to a whisper. "It hasn't even started." She stormed out, heels clicking loudly through the hallway. Theo didn't chase her. He turned off the light and sat at the desk, hand resting on the now secured vault. In the silence, he whispered a single sentence. "She's going to ruin herself before I even have to." But as he spoke, another monitor came to life in the hidden office upstairs. A different tenant was now showing signs of interest in the tower's hidden layers. Someone he hadn't expected. Someone far more dangerous than Veronica. And suddenly Theo realized. The game was getting bigger. Theo returned to the hidden office just after midnight, the halls of Lux Veritas Tower now cloaked in their usual midnight silence. The world of the rich slept with their alarms armed, blinds drawn, and thermostats perfectly calibrated by AI. But tonight, even the tower's stillness felt heavier. He closed the metal panel behind him, locked it with the biometric scanner, and sat before the wall of monitors. Veronica's intrusion into Unit 14C had shaken him, but not because she discovered his identity. That was inevitable. No secret could stay buried forever. What disturbed him was how close she had come to accessing something far more dangerous than journals. The vault contained a backup drive. And the drive didn't just have Theo's story. It had everyone's. Every tenant's rent history. Surveillance footage. Audio logs. Financial records. Ethical audits. Contracts. Exit clauses. Even confidential files sent to and from their business partners. Records Theo had legally obtained through a network of silent investors and digital rights embedded in Lux Veritas lease agreements. The tenants never read the fine print. And someone new was beginning to notice. On the monitor in the top left corner, Theo spotted a shadow moving across the hallway outside Unit 17C. Dr. Asim Bundari. A soft-spoken neuroscientist. A green-level tenant. Clean record. Known for paying rent 6 months in advance. But over the last 2 weeks, he'd grown increasingly curious. The footage showed him walking down to level 12 late at night, then level 8 the next. Always pausing near service panels. Sometimes tapping on walls. He wasn't just wandering. He was searching. Theo clicked open Asim's tenant profile. No prior complaints. No negative marks. But tonight, he had entered the East Utility stairwell and turned off the CCTV camera with a small tool from his lab. That was no accident. Theo frowned. He'd underestimated Asim. There were 2 types of people in Lux Veritas. The loud ones who failed quickly, and the quiet ones who took longer to reveal themselves. Asim had been invisible. Until now. Theo stood up, grabbed his notebook, and opened a clean page. Tenant observation, Dr. Asim Bundari. Highly intelligent. Technically skilled. Previously compliant. Now showing patterns of strategic curiosity. Status, unknown. Monitor closely. He tapped into the emergency hallway mics and caught Asim humming softly to himself while working on a circuit panel, bypassing a standard lock system not accessible to tenants. What was he trying to find? Theo's mind moved fast. Maybe Asim suspected more than just hidden floors. Maybe he had discovered something in the building's digital backbone. Something that hinted at surveillance or ownership beyond the public company records. If that were true, then the danger wasn't just about exposure. It was about control. Because if a brilliant man like Asim found the vault, or worse, the founder's charter, he could flip Theo's quiet plan into chaos. In the center of the room, a small alarm light blinked. Theo opened the live feed to Mila's cafe. She was still inside. Alone. She sat by the front window, writing something in a leather-bound notebook. It wasn't the first time she stayed late. But tonight, she didn't look tired. She looked focused. Then she did something that made Theo sit up straighter. She pulled out a folder. And from that folder, a document with the name Baxter Holdings in the top right corner. He zoomed in. A property ledger. She had found it. His legal name. His signature. Mila knew. And unlike Veronica, she didn't panic. She just stared at the document, as if weighing something heavier than truth. Maybe responsibility. Theo didn't feel fear. He felt something far rarer in his world. Hope. But also urgency. Because now, 3 people were moving pieces behind the curtain. Veronica had tried force. Asim was using intellect. Mila. She had discovered the truth gently, and kept it to herself. 3 paths. 3 possible futures. And somewhere deep in the data vault, the algorithms Theo built years ago had already begun calculating loyalty, risk, and influence. This wasn't just a social experiment anymore. It was a selection process. Outside, the city of Emerald Heights glowed under a moonless sky. The towers stood like temples. But inside Lux Veritas, the battle for the soul of the building had begun. Theo reached for a sealed envelope from the gold folder marked Project Inheritance. He opened it. Inside was a single white keycard. On it, one line: Access, Owner Tier 1. He placed it in a blank envelope and wrote a name on the front: Mila. But he didn't send it yet. Not tonight. Because if a sim found what he was looking for, he might claim the future before she ever had the chance. 2 days later, the atmosphere inside Lux Veritas Tower was as elegant and cold as ever. Nothing seemed out of place. The concierge smiled politely. The marble floors were waxed to a mirror-like shine. The elevators purred like luxury sedans. But beneath that high-gloss surface, the tower was buzzing, not with noise but with movement. With secrets. With testing. Theo had learned to read silence like a language. From his hidden office beneath level 2B, he observed the tower's 3 most watched tenants. Veronica, the public face with a private grudge. A sim, the quiet intellectual who had nearly unlocked the vault's failsafe firewall. And Mila, who still hadn't said a word about what she'd discovered in the ledger. Theo leaned back in his chair and reviewed the footage again. Mila had found the truth. He was sure of it. She'd opened the folder, scanned the title, and seen his name. She could have gone to the press. She could have posted it on her cafe wall. She could have confronted him in the hallway. She did none of those things. Instead, she'd locked the folder in her desk drawer and gone right back to brewing coffee for a lonely teenager who lived on floor 9. Theo wrote a fresh note in the margins of his leather notebook. Humility under discovery, Mila passed 4th test. But something was shifting. Late that night, Theo received a silent notification from one of his older motion sensors, installed during the original construction. It pinged from level 7, a restricted maintenance floor accessible only by master keys. No tenant had business there. But someone had forced the panel open. Theo ran the camera feed and saw a thin figure in a dark coat entering the stairwell. It wasn't a sim. It wasn't Veronica. It was Daniel, the tower's overnight concierge. For months, Theo had overlooked Daniel. Friendly, efficient, always polite. He'd passed every surface-level test. Never rude to janitorial staff, never late, never nosy. But now Daniel was picking the lock on the service panel that led directly to Theo's surveillance lines. And he knew exactly where to look. Theo's blood ran cold, not from fear but realization. There was a 4th player in this game. Daniel wasn't just a concierge. He had tech skill, precision, timing, and the way he moved, calm, professional, like someone trained in systems, not service. Theo zoomed in on Daniel's hands. He was wearing gloves. Not ordinary ones, anti-static, used by engineers handling sensitive electronics. So this wasn't a lucky guess or harmless curiosity. Daniel was here with purpose. Theo activated a silent trigger that would disable the power to level 7 in 90 seconds. Not enough to trap him, but enough to interrupt whatever he was doing. The screen blinked. Daniel connected a small USB device to the internal diagnostics port. A soft glow appeared on his face. Theo waited narrow-eyed until the backup power system kicked in and Daniel paused, confused. Then the feed cut out. Theo moved. He grabbed his janitor's coat and slipped into the hallway through the rear exit, avoiding all main cameras. By the time he reached level 7, Daniel was gone. Only the open panel and faint smell of hot circuitry remained. Theo checked the diagnostics port. The USB was gone, but he'd left traces, downloaded logs, file access records. Theo scanned them and froze. Daniel had copied surveillance logs. Not just his own. He had pulled data for multiple tenants, including Veronica, a sim, Mila, and Theo himself. Why? For who? That night, Theo returned to his office and opened a 5th file, one he hadn't touched in years. Security breach protocol, internal threat level alpha. He'd hoped never to use it. He typed a name on the cover page. Daniel Kravitz, former IT analyst, Quantum Core Holdings. Then he paused. Quantum Core was a firm Theo had once tried to buy, back before his disappearance. He remembered the board rejecting him, then leaking his mental health records to the media. The betrayal had driven him underground. And now one of their former employees was embedded in his building? This wasn't random. Someone had sent Daniel into Lux Veritas to find him. It meant Theo's disguise as the janitor was cracking. Fast. He turned to the envelope with Mila's name. It wasn't safe to deliver it now. Not yet. Because someone else, maybe Daniel, maybe whoever controlled him, was moving to unmask Theo completely. And if they beat him to it, Project Inheritance wouldn't just fail. It would be turned against the very people he wanted to protect. Theo returned to the cameras and watched Mila lock up her cafe, humming softly as she wiped down the last table. Across the tower, a sim stared at a computer model of the building's electrical grid, eyes red from sleeplessness. And Veronica? She was throwing a dinner party in her penthouse, laughing, pretending nothing had happened. But all three of them were being watched now. And none of them knew that someone new had just entered the game. Someone in uniform, with a stolen file, and a motive. Theo tapped the keyboard once, locking the surveillance system behind 5 levels of encryption. Then he whispered to himself, "It's no longer about who deserves to stay. It's about who survives what's coming." The test was no longer theoretical. It had just turned real. Theo didn't sleep that night. He paced the narrow concrete floor of his hidden office, the soft glow of monitors casting long shadows against the wall. The file labeled Daniel Kravitz, Internal Threat Alpha, sat open beside him. The data was troubling and precise. Daniel had been inside for 7 months. He had rerouted minor network ports without detection. He had accessed surveillance archives backdated nearly 4 years. Worse, he hadn't gone after the wealthiest tenants. He'd gone after the ones who were potential. Mila, a sim, even a young Ghanaian architect on the 10th floor who had never once missed rent, but who'd recently applied for a grant through a shell company, one secretly owned by Theo's holding firm. Daniel had pulled that file too. He wasn't chasing money. He was mapping influence. Theo leaned against the wall, fingers pressed to his temples. This wasn't a personal vendetta. This was corporate reconnaissance. Quantum Core, or whoever was bankrolling Daniel, was looking to reclaim the future Theo had hidden inside Lux Veritas. They wanted Project Inheritance. And now they were circling the building's soul. He flipped open the encrypted terminal, entered a 6-phase password, and activated an older protocol he hadn't touched in years. Architect Watch. Instantly, a dormant AI thread named Argo. One booted up and began scanning the building's network for anomalous behaviors. It would flag anything: data duplication, rogue connections, wireless breaches, physical overrides. Within 5 seconds, a soft beep echoed. 2 devices. Unknown signals. One was from Daniel. The second, Theo zoomed in on the signal's location. Unit 22D. He paused. That unit belonged to an elderly woman named Miss Genevieve Okoro, a former diplomat who rarely left her apartment. She was dignified, kind, and still sent handwritten thank you notes to cafe staff. She had once told Theo, not knowing who he was, "I see more truth in your mop than in all the designer suits on this floor." Why would Daniel be tracking her? He pulled up the camera feed for 22D. And there she was, Genevieve, seated in her antique armchair, a thick book on her lap, her cat curled beside her. But something was off. The living room lighting had a slight stutter. A flicker only visible through low frame rate capture. Theo enhanced the feed. There, on her bookshelf, a small lens was embedded in the decorative bust of an African queen. It wasn't hers. She was being watched. From inside. Theo's heart pounded. Who else had been tapped? He ran a sweep of all units using the Argo 1 AI. One by one, it pinged a terrifying list. 6 total wiretaps. None planted by Theo. All placed within the last 3 months. All focused on tenants with either ethical promise or quietly growing power. This wasn't a test anymore. This was sabotage. He had built Lux Veritas to find and nurture leaders. Empaths. People who could inherit a future of power with grace. But someone else wanted those people weakened or eliminated, before they ever had the chance. Theo tapped the envelope with Mila's name again. His gut screamed deliberate, but timing was everything. If Daniel suspected that Theo had caught on, he might accelerate whatever plan was unfolding. And if Mila was pulled in too early, she'd be in danger before she had the tools to defend herself. Instead, Theo made a different move. He slid a blank envelope into his pocket and took the elevator up. This time not as janitor, but as a courier from building operations. No one questioned him. When he reached Asim Bundari's unit, he knocked gently. The door opened cautiously. Asim, half-dressed in a gray hoodie, squinted at the visitor. "I've got a file for you," Theo said simply, voice low. Asim took it, puzzled. "From who?" "No name. Just data," Theo replied. Inside was a printed image of his own recent movements, captured by the rogue wiretaps. And beneath that, a map of Lux Veritas' hidden stairways. the very ones Asim had been tracing in secret. Asim looked up sharply. "What is this?" Theo didn't answer. He only said, "You're not the only one searching." Then he turned and walked away. Asim stood frozen in the doorway, eyes darting from the envelope to the hallway. Behind him, on the table, was a diagram of the building's hidden energy grid. Below it, a sticky note read, "Central node, possible owner's vault?" Theo returned to the janitor's closet and slipped back into the shadows. He didn't need to warn Mila just yet. She was being watched, but not yet targeted. But Asim? He was about to become a threat. To the intruder. And to the tower's true design. And in this game of observation, the person who acted next would reveal everything. Mila wiped down the cafe counter as the last of the evening's light drifted through the grand window panes of the Lux Veritas Tower's lobby. The air smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. The jazz playing overhead softened into a lull, and the high-rise felt strangely still. Peaceful. But peace was an illusion in this building. She glanced across the lobby and caught Daniel, the night concierge, tapping quietly at the console behind his desk. He gave her a short smile, polite and practiced. She returned it, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mila had grown up around powerful people who wore masks. Her mother had been a lawyer in Accra, her father a well-known political aide. She had learned early that charm could hide daggers. And Daniel, he smiled too quickly, stood too straight. His eyes flicked toward security cameras when he thought no one noticed. He noticed everything. She finished cleaning, turned off the espresso machine, and locked the cafe. Then she walked slowly, deliberately, toward the elevators. She wasn't going to her apartment. She was going to storage room 3C, the one behind the library wall. No one else used it, not officially. It had no public keycard access, but she had discovered a back route weeks ago while helping a resident locate a missing package. That storage room was where she'd found the strange ledger weeks earlier, the one with Theo's handwriting inside. She hadn't opened it since. But tonight, something in her gut told her to go back. She entered the elevator and pressed the button for level 3. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the screen. In the hidden office, Theo saw it too. His monitors were lit up again, Mila's tracker now active. He sat forward in his chair, torn. He'd left the ledger there intentionally weeks ago, knowing someone curious enough and kind enough might stumble upon it. He hadn't expected Mila to be the one. And now she was going back. He opened a second feed, the one trained on Daniel's desk. Daniel was gone. Theo's hands clenched. Down on level 3, Mila exited the elevator. The hallway was dim and smelled faintly of wood polish and old paper. She walked past the library's false wall, pulled the baseboard aside, and slid through the slim hidden opening. She stepped into the old storage room. It was quiet. Still. But not empty. The lights were already on. Mila froze. Someone had been here recently. She stepped carefully across the concrete floor toward the stack of crates where she'd hidden the ledger behind some dust-covered books. She reached down slowly, moved the books aside, and stopped. The ledger was gone. In its place was a photo. Of her. At the cafe. From behind the register. Taken through the glass. Mila's heart slammed against her chest. Someone had taken it, and left this instead. Suddenly, the door clicked. Footsteps. She turned and backed away behind a metal shelf just as the door creaked open. A figure stepped in, tall, lean, wearing a black jacket. Daniel. He moved with precision, like someone who didn't expect to be interrupted. He walked to the crate, found the photo gone, and froze. Then slowly, he turned around, eyes scanning the shadows. Mila held her breath, crouched low. She couldn't move. She didn't dare. Daniel pulled out his phone, typed a few words, and sent a message. Theo's terminal buzzed. He intercepted the text. She knows. Initiating clean step. Theo leapt to his feet, heart thundering. He activated an override on the security system, plunging level 3 into emergency protocol. Lights dimmed to red, alarms muted, and all elevators paused. Daniel spun around at the sudden change. Mila didn't wait. She bolted from her hiding spot and raced for the service crawl space at the back of the room. She didn't know where it led, only that Theo had scribbled a note once about emergency exits for ethical evacuees. Behind her, Daniel shouted, "Hey!" She didn't stop. She dove into the crawl space, heart pounding in her ears. Dust and wires scraped her arms, and the air smelled like old steel. She crawled through the dark, hands shaking, until a soft light appeared ahead. And there, waiting at the hatch, was Theo. Not in disguise. Not as a janitor, but in a black tailored jacket. His real face. His real identity. Mila froze. Theo held out his hand. She hesitated, then took it. He pulled her through the hatch and locked it behind them just as footsteps echoed down the shaft. For the first time, their eyes met. No walls, no secrets. "Who are you?" she whispered, breathless. Theo looked at her, not as a tenant, not as a staff member, but as an equal. "I'm the man trying to keep you safe," he said. And behind them, the tower stirred again. Because Daniel now knew someone was helping her. The game had entered a new phase. And the tower? It was waking up. The hallway behind the crawl space was narrow, industrial, and silent. Thick concrete walls, exposed steel beams, and low amber lighting gave it the look of a bunker. It wasn't part of the Lux Veritas blueprints. This space was never meant to be seen by tenants. Mila walked behind Theo, her breath still shaky, trying to steady her thoughts. Everything had changed in a matter of minutes. Daniel had been following her, watching her. And now Theo, the janitor, was standing before her not as the quiet man who swept the marble floors, but as something else entirely. Something powerful. "Where are we?" she asked softly. Theo didn't stop walking. The core spine, a forgotten part of the original foundation, sealed off after the first renovation. Only 4 people know it exists. "Let me guess," Mila said, her voice tightening. "You're one of them." Theo looked over his shoulder. "The last one still alive." She blinked. They turned a corner, and the tunnel opened into a steel-paneled chamber. In the center sat a large round door with a biometric lock, framed in brass. It looked like a vault. Mila stepped closer. "What is this?" Theo placed his palm on the scanner. The lock clicked. "This," he said, "is where everything begins." The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a room unlike anything Mila had ever seen. It was a circular command center. Monitors lined every wall. Maps, heat signatures, encrypted data streams, rent logs, even emotion-based AI summaries of every tenant's behavior filled the screens. On one display, a digital map of the building pulsed in red and blue, with tiny lights blinking beside apartment numbers. A large oak desk sat in the middle of the room. Behind it, on a glass pedestal, rested a black leather book. The same ledger Mila had found. She walked toward it slowly, her hands trembling. "You left that there," she said. "In the storage room. For me to find." Theo nodded. "I wanted to see what you'd do with the truth." Mila turned, her eyes filled with disbelief. "You've been watching everyone? Testing us like lab rats? Like you're some kind of puppet master?" "No," Theo said, his voice calm. "I've been protecting this building from what it was becoming. From what people like Daniel are trying to turn it into." "You think that justifies spying?" she snapped. Theo didn't flinch. "I think sometimes the only way to see who deserves power is to watch how they treat those they believe are beneath them." Silence filled the room. Mila looked at the screens again. One of them showed her apartment, empty. Another showed Daniel pacing in the lobby, typing furiously on his phone. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Why did you let me find the ledger?" Theo hesitated. Then carefully he said, "Because you see things other people ignore. You listen when people speak. You helped a tenant move her groceries up 6 floors during a power outage. You didn't know the cameras were on you. You did it anyway." Mila stared at him. And in that moment, her fear cracked into something else. Anger. "You think watching makes you better than them?" she asked. "It doesn't. It makes you alone." Theo didn't respond immediately. But his silence wasn't defensive. It was tired. "I know," he said softly. Mila stepped back, unsure what to believe anymore. Then the monitors began to flash. Theo spun toward the largest one. Red warnings flooded the screen. "Breach attempt, sublevel server room. Unauthorized access. Location, SUB Bay 2. ID match, Daniel Kravitz." Theo's eyes widened. "He's found the lower tier." "What's down there?" Mila asked. "The charter. The original contract that grants ownership of Lux Veritas," Theo said. "If he gets it, he can transfer control of the building to Quantum Core." "Why haven't you destroyed it?" Mila demanded. "Because then no one inherits anything," he replied. "This isn't about control, it's about legacy." Another alarm sounded. Emergency protocols flickered across the screens. "Can you stop him?" Mila asked. Theo shook his head. "Not from here. Not without triggering a full system wipe." He turned to Mila. "But we can slow him down. You know the public levels better than anyone. He'll need to go through them to reach the vault. You can intercept him. Distract him. Keep him in the dark about what you've seen. You want me to lie? She asked. I want you to choose, Theo said. For the first time since this began. I'm not giving an order. I'm asking for help. Mila stepped toward the screen showing Daniel's path. He was already on sublevel 4. I'm in, she said quietly. Theo nodded. As she turned to leave, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a plain white envelope. Take this, he said. What is it? Proof, he said. That everything I've told you is true. She stared at it for a second, then tucked it inside her coat. I hope you're right about me, she said. I am, he replied. I just don't know yet if that's a good thing. Mila left the vault, moving fast through the hidden halls toward the upper lobby. Her mind raced with questions, but her hands were steady. For the first time, she wasn't just a tenant. She was a player. And the building? The building was watching. Mila emerged from the hidden hallway and stepped back into the polished world of Lux Veritas like nothing had happened. The lobby lights gleamed against the marble floor, and the night concierge's desk sat unmanned. Daniel was still below, chasing power. She moved fast. Her reflection in the tall black windows made her pause. She looked like herself, same cafe uniform, same neatly tied hair, but everything inside her had changed. Her hands tightened around the envelope Theo had given her. It felt heavier than paper. She walked briskly through the west corridor toward the elevator, where a group of tenants were waiting to go up. Among them was Charlotte Duquesne, the sharp-tongued art dealer from 19G. Charlotte caught sight of Mila and gave a smirk. You again, Charlotte said with a tilt of her head. You people work all hours, don't you? Mila didn't answer. She pressed the elevator button, her jaw clenched. One of the other tenants, a young man with designer sunglasses on at night, added, These new staff don't even try to look professional anymore. The elevator doors opened. Mila stepped in. As the doors slid shut, she caught Charlotte whispering something that made the others laugh. Theo had been right about one thing. People revealed themselves when no one was watching. Only now someone was watching, and she was done pretending not to see. The elevator dinged on level 5, and Mila stepped out. She knew Daniel would have to pass through here on his way back up. Theo had shown her a blueprint on the monitor. If Daniel accessed Sub-Bay 2, his route back to the public floors would funnel him through the mechanical junction just off the spa level. That gave her maybe 20 minutes. She headed there now, heart pounding. Meanwhile, below, Daniel stood in front of the sealed archive vault on sublevel 2. The biometric scanner blinked red. He tried again. Still denied. He scowled and pulled out a USB drive from inside his coat, plugging it into a hidden port behind a ventilation panel. The system flickered. Override initializing, he whispered. A bar on the screen filled slowly. Back upstairs, Mila reached the spa level and entered the maintenance corridor. Bare concrete, humming pipes, dim light. She crouched by the door Theo had marked on her map. It was narrow, and it rattled lightly as she pushed it open. It led to a crawl space above the mechanical room. She pulled herself inside and waited. 10 minutes later, the sound of footsteps. Daniel. She could see him through the grating, his tall frame moving fast, scanning the area. He paused near the lockers where spare uniforms were stored. He looked tense, sweating. He checked his phone, cursed softly, and started moving toward the access stairwell that would take him up to level 7, the executive apartments. That's when Mila acted. She dropped from the vent with a soft thud and stepped directly into his path. Daniel froze. Mila, he said coolly, slipping the phone into his jacket. Burning the midnight oil? I could ask you the same, she said. He tilted his head. This area is restricted. What are you doing here? I could say the same, she repeated. His eyes darkened. You've been poking around. I found something, she said, stepping forward. And I think it's time someone else sees it. She reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope Theo had given her. She didn't hand it to him, just held it between two fingers. Daniel's posture shifted. What is that? Something worth more than this whole building, she said. And I'm taking it to someone who can do something about it. He took a step closer. Mila didn't back down. If you touch me, she said quietly, half the building's security system will light up like Christmas. You think Theo didn't see this coming? Daniel laughed just once. It was cold. Dry. You're in way over your head. So are you. Silence. Then Daniel smiled, but his eyes didn't. You think Theo's a hero? He asked. He's not. He built this place on manipulation and secrets. I'm just correcting his mistake. By stealing it, By evolving it, he snapped. This tower should belong to a network, not one man's idea of morality. Who is he to judge anyone? Mila's voice softened. You're wrong. This isn't about ownership. It's about accountability. And you're about to lose everything. Before he could respond, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Not hers. Not his. Theo appeared, calm, silent, dressed in a charcoal blazer. Daniel turned sharply. So this is it? You sent her to stall me. Theo's expression didn't change. She chose to. Daniel laughed bitterly. Of course. The righteous ones always do. He turned and shoved past Mila, heading up the stairwell. Mila looked at Theo. You could have stopped him. I could have, Theo replied. But now I know where he's going. He pulled out a small device from his coat and tapped the screen. Tracking activated, he said. Let's see what he does next. Mila handed him the envelope. He didn't get it. Theo didn't open it. He just smiled faintly. He was never meant to. She looked at him. What's inside? A copy of something I've never let anyone see, Theo replied. Until now. Mila stared at him. The tower suddenly felt bigger. Darker. More dangerous. And still, she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because whatever came next, she knew now. This building wasn't just concrete and steel. It was a test. And she had just passed the first round. The next morning, Lux Veritas Tower looked like perfection. Valets in pressed suits opened the lobby doors. A string quartet played softly near the reception lounge. Glass chandeliers threw diamond-like patterns onto polished floors. Nothing betrayed the war quietly unfolding within its walls. But behind the mirrors, the marble, and the music, things were shifting. Mila stood behind the counter of her cafe on the third floor, pouring a guest an oat milk cappuccino. Her hands moved with practiced ease, but her eyes were fixed on the live feed playing on the tablet hidden beneath the register. Theo had sent it that morning. It showed Daniel in the penthouse elevator, speaking with someone over a secure line. Plan still on. Vault was inaccessible, but we're activating phase 2, Daniel was saying. Launch the proxy acquisition. Get our guy inside the board. By the end of the week, I want Theo Reynolds out. Mila's breath caught at the last line. Theo hadn't told her anyone knew his real name. She handed the coffee to the customer with a smile that barely held. The moment they were gone, she ducked into the kitchen, locking the back door behind her. Theo's number was already dialed. He answered after one ring. I heard it, she said. They're coming for you. I know, Theo replied calmly. Let them. It'll show me who's loyal. You can't be serious. I'm always serious. She could hear typing in the background. Monitors buzzing. They've already started pushing documents through fake LLCs, he said. Shell companies with names like Everhart and Boone and Vera Urban Capital. They're trying to shift controlling interest. They'll present it to the board in 72 hours. And you're just going to sit there? Mila demanded. No, he said. I'm going to let them think I'm sitting still. Silence. Then he added, I need you to do something. Name it. There's a file in my vault. Red folder. Top drawer. Labeled pillar agreements. Take it. Do not open it. Deliver it to Ruth LaSalle. Mila frowned. Who's Ruth LaSalle? You'll know her when you see her. She owns the hat boutique across the street. Looks like a retired librarian. She's one of the original 7. 7 what? The founders. The ones who actually built Lux Veritas. I was just the young man they chose to protect it. Mila's mind reeled. Tell her it's time. And if she asks why? Theo's voice lowered. Tell her Daniel's making his move. That afternoon, Mila slipped the red folder into a tote bag, crossed the street, and entered the hat boutique. The smell of sandalwood and lavender greeted her. An old woman sat behind the counter, sipping mint tea, knitting. Miss LaSalle? Mila asked. The woman looked up, eyes sharp despite her age. Who's asking? Mila swallowed. Theo sent me. Said it was time. Without another word, Ruth LaSalle stood and locked the front door. Back at the tower, Daniel wasn't wasting any time. He was now walking through level 23, inspecting the empty model units, making calls to potential investors, and planting news of a supposed upcoming acquisition. The more noise he made, the more support he gained. Greedy tenants welcomed the idea. New developers meant potential buyouts. Renovations. Prestige. But others, like Mr. Osei, the 87-year-old Ghanaian sculptor in 7A, quietly slipped notes under Theo's office door. We're with you. Like a machine quietly resisting corrosion. Theo moved between hidden floors like a ghost. Watching. listening, planning. And on that same day, for the first time, he met Mila on the roof. It was dusk. The skyline blushed violet and gold. Below them, Lux Veritas glowed like a lantern in the city's heart. "This place is breathtaking," she whispered. Theo nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Do you know what I regret?" he said. She looked at him. "That I ever thought wealth would protect good intentions," he said. "But it doesn't. It attracts decay if left unguarded." "You're not alone anymore," she said. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "That's what I'm afraid of," he murmured. The wind picked up. Then his phone buzzed once. He checked the message. One word. LaSalle, activated. Mila's voice was quiet. "What does that mean?" "It means," Theo said, "the old guards are awake. And Daniel just made the worst mistake of his life." Mila exhaled, staring at the lights of the building below. The game was no longer just between floors. It was everywhere now, inside lobbies, behind office doors, inside the hearts of people who thought they were above consequences. And finally, for the first time, Lux Veritas was watching back. The following morning, a black Rolls-Royce pulled up to the curb of Lux Veritas Tower. Out stepped Ruth LaSalle, dressed in a sharp dove-gray coat, white gloves, and a hat so wide it shaded her entire face. She walked with the calm of someone who had once commanded entire rooms without raising her voice. The concierge, who didn't recognize her, stammered slightly. "Ma'am, how are you?" Ruth flashed a sleek brass card. The man blinked, then silently stepped aside. Upstairs, Theo watched the live feed from the control room. Mila stood beside him, clutching a warm mug of tea. "She's early," Mila said. "She always is," Theo replied. Ruth entered the private lift, used only for board-level access. No one else in the building had a card that worked on it anymore. No one except Theo, and the originals. Mila turned to him. "You really never told anyone about her?" "I didn't need to," Theo said. "People forget the quiet ones, until they realize the quiet ones wrote the contract." The doors slid open on level 50, a floor tenants didn't even know existed. A long corridor of glass walls and soundproof conference rooms awaited. And in the farthest room, waiting at the head of the polished obsidian table, was Dr. William Grantham, age 92, legally blind but still sharp as ever. He had been the tower's first architect. His hearing aid blinked faintly blue. When Ruth entered, he didn't turn, but he smiled. "I knew it," he said. He finally woke the lioness. Ruth didn't smile back. She placed the red folder on the table and took a seat. "Daniel Ngata is making his move," she said coldly. "And he's not working alone." Grantham sighed. He was always too clever. And too greedy. More figures began to arrive quietly. A former judge. A real estate matriarch. A retired general. One by one, 6 figures took their places around the table. Only one seat was empty. Tauhe. Back in the control room, Mila was watching it all unfold with wide eyes. "Who are these people?" she asked. Theo stood slowly and straightened his collar. "They're the real board. The invisible hands. The ones who swore never to let this tower fall into filth." He turned to Mila. "And now they've reconvened." Mila watched him closely. "What will they do?" "They'll vote." "On what?" "Whether I remain their executor," Theo said softly. "Or whether I've failed." The words hung in the air. "But," Mila stammered, "you've protected this place. You've tested everyone. You've done more than anyone." Theo offered a faint smile. "Even a janitor gets evaluated." Meanwhile, in the East Wing, Daniel was all smiles. He had gathered several of the tower's wealthiest tenants, Lucas, Veronica, Jamie, and others, into the West Atrium. They were sipping champagne and being pitched his vision. "New management," he said smoothly. "Smarter investment. More return. I've already got a development team lined up to expand our holdings internationally." Jamie clapped him on the back. "This is exactly what this place needs. That janitor's been bad luck since he showed up." "Agreed," said Veronica, glancing at herself in a handheld mirror. "He brings the vibe down." Daniel grinned. "Well, you may not have to see him much longer." "Don't tell me he's finally being fired?" Lucas smirked. Daniel only winked. What none of them knew was that a hidden mic in the chandelier was broadcasting everything they said, directly to the original boardroom. Ruth was listening. Her jaw clenched. "This tower isn't a club for petty egos," she muttered. Grantham nodded slowly. "Let's begin the vote." Back in the control room, Theo looked at Mila. "I won't attend," he said. "I've done what I could. My last test isn't for the tenants." She frowned. Then who? He turned the tablet around to show her the screen. On it was a grainy still image of her, standing in front of Daniel last night in the mechanical hallway, unafraid. You, he said simply. Mila's chest rose with a shaky breath. You knew this whole time? I watched from day one. She stepped back, eyes wide. You were testing me? Theo nodded. Everyone is part of the tower's story, but some become its future. Mila swallowed. So what happens now? Theo looked toward the camera feed one last time. Ruth stood, red folder in hand, addressing the board. The tower stays under Theo's care, she said firmly. And we begin cleansing the rot, top to bottom. Unanimous nods. Unanimous power. Back in the atrium, Daniel received a text. Board vote complete. Position revoked. Formal notice incoming. His heart stopped. His hand trembled. Then something even worse happened. Every screen in the atrium flickered to life. And footage began to play, of him, speaking of shell companies, mocking Theo, declaring war on the very building. The tenants gasped. Veronica dropped her champagne flute. Lucas's face went pale. Daniel backed away slowly. From the rooftop, Theo watched it all. His expression unreadable. He pressed a button. Security lockdown, level 23. East Wing. Executive lounge. Doors clicked. Windows darkened. Daniel was trapped. And Mila? She was already on her way there. Not to deliver a threat, but to offer him one last choice. Because even rats deserved a chance to leave the sinking ship. But only once. Mila stepped out of the service elevator and into the East Wing with steady feet. The walls here were mirrored obsidian, reflecting her image in fractured shards as she walked. The air smelled faintly of citrus and leather, a manufactured sense of wealth. Ahead, the double doors to the executive lounge were sealed. Behind them, Daniel paced like a tiger in a glass cage. She didn't knock. She pressed the override code Theo had given her, and the doors hissed open. Daniel spun around. The once slick developer now looked cornered. His collar was undone, his phone blinking with unanswered calls, and a fine sheen of sweat clung to his forehead. He blinked at her. You. Mila walked in slowly, tote bag slung over her shoulder like she was visiting a museum exhibit. Daniel scoffed. If Theo's sending baristas now, he's more pathetic than I thought. Mila smiled slightly. Funny. That's what Veronica said about janitors. His jaw twitched. She reached into the tote and pulled out a slim silver tablet. Placing it on the table between them, she swiped to open a file. Everhart and Boone. Vera Urban Capital. Whisperline Holdings. All linked to you, she said coolly. All under review by the city's Financial Crimes Division as of this morning. Daniel stiffened. That's not possible. It is. Especially when your own security system was hacked by someone who's been watching you for years. Mila tapped another screen. A short video clip played. Daniel at a yacht party last summer, drunkenly bragging about burying bribe payments in offshore trust accounts. The sound was crisp. Too crisp. He went pale. You bugged me, he hissed. We didn't have to, she said. You broadcast your sins to everyone who would listen. You just never thought anyone beneath you was listening. Daniel's face twisted with rage. You think this means anything? People like me don't fall. We get promoted. I'll spin this. I'll say Theo's unstable. That this tower's rotting from the inside. He stepped closer, trying to tower over her. But Mila didn't flinch. Daniel, she said softly, you lost the moment you mistook silence for weakness. He froze. You called this tower a rotting place, she continued, voice steady. But it's not rotting. It's watching. Judging. Cleaning itself from the inside out. He sneered. And you think you're its savior? No, Mila said. But I might be its future. A sharp knock sounded from the hallway. 2 uniformed security officers waited at the door. One carried a leather case. The other held a white envelope. Mila turned toward Daniel one last time. This is your only offer, she said. Resign your board ambitions. Publicly. Today. Sign the non-compete. Walk away. Quietly. Daniel laughed bitterly. Or what? I get arrested. Mila tilted her head. Oh no. Theo prefers something worse. Daniel blinked. He'll make sure no tower, no developer, no investor within this city ever trusts you again. You'll become a man who used to almost be someone. He looked at the guards. At the tablet. At the walls. Then slowly he sat. And signed. The envelope was sealed. The pen capped. The guards escorted him out through the freight corridor. No headlines, no drama, no parting applause. Just the quiet walk of a man who thought he owned the tower, but never truly lived inside it. Back in the main control room, Theo sat in his chair, watching the final footage. He closed the feed, then exhaled. For the first time in weeks, he stood and turned off the room's lights. Down in the lobby, tenants gathered to stare at the now black screens where Daniel's face had once been. Lucas, Jamie, and Tiffany were silent. Veronica tried to reach her agent on the phone, but it was too late. Lux Veritas had spoken. Later that evening, Mila stepped onto the rooftop garden once more. Theo was already there, tending to the plants. He was in a charcoal shirt with rolled sleeves, wiping dirt from his hands. "Is it done?" he asked without turning. She nodded. "He's gone." Quietly. He smiled faintly. "That's the best way." They stood in silence for a moment, the city's lights glittering below them. Then Theo reached into his jacket and pulled out a small key. "What's that?" Mila asked. He handed it to her. It was smooth gold with a symbol etched into it, the tower's crest. "The key to the observation room," he said. "The one on the 52nd floor." She frowned. "I thought there were only 50. "There were," he said. "Until you arrived." Mila stared at him, stunned. Theo stepped back. "You're not the janitor. You're not a tenant. You're something in between." She didn't understand at first. But then the meaning settled. The tower wasn't just a building. It was a story, a test, a mirror. And she had passed. Down in the lobby, new tenants were arriving. Modest people with bright eyes and humble clothes. People who greeted security by name. People who held open doors. People who didn't look down. The kind of people Theo had been quietly inviting all along. The tower was changing. Not louder, but finer. And as the city moved around them, Mila looked at the key in her hand and wondered what her next test would be. Because in Lux Veritas, everyone is being watched. Even the watchers. And the real story had only just begun. The city buzzed below as a thunderstorm rolled in from the east. Rain tapped lightly on the glass walls of Lux Veritas Tower, streaking the skyline in watery gold. Inside the tower, however, all was still, eerily so. Mila stood alone in the elevator, key in hand. The button marked 52 hadn't existed until today. And even now, as she held the golden key against the tiny, etched symbol beneath the button panel, she felt a strange hum run through her fingertips. With a soft chime, the elevator doors shut, and the world began to rise. The numbers climbed: 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, then 52. The elevator slowed, and a smooth female voice echoed overhead. "Welcome, Mila Rosario. Observation level. Access granted." When the doors opened, Mila stepped into a room unlike anything she'd ever seen. It wasn't opulent, it was precise. The entire floor was circular, with floor-to-ceiling glass offering a panoramic view of the city. In the center of the room stood a single black leather chair, and before it, a floating glass desk, no legs, no cables. A small circular platform beneath her feet lit up as she walked, following her steps. A screen shimmered to life in midair. And then a voice. "Theo. Not live, pre-recorded. If you're seeing this," his voice said, "then the board has agreed to extend you what they never offered me, shared control." Mila's breath caught. On the screen, a series of files opened. Tenant profiles, structural blueprints, internal ethics reports. Even detailed behavior scores on every person in the building. Lux Veritas was never just about luxury, the recording continued. It was a mirror to the city, a filter for character. The rich believe they built it, but this tower was built against them. Mila walked to the desk, still absorbing it all. Names she recognized scrolled by: Veronica Armand, Dax Huntley, even Daniel Ngata. Their profiles had colored bars next to them: red, yellow, or green. Ethics. Conduct. Influence. Greed. She hovered her hand over a green file. Her own. One word pulsed faintly beneath it: candidate. Theo's voice went on. "I didn't know what I was doing when I started. I just knew I wanted to protect something. Not brick. Not steel. People. The right ones. The ones no one gave a second glance." A pause. "You're here because you gave a damn when it cost you nothing." Mila swallowed. Outside, lightning cracked through the sky. And for the first time, she realized, this floor wasn't just an observation deck. It was a control room. Behind her, a soft chime sounded. She turned and saw a man standing in the elevator's doorway. Not Theo. A boy. Maybe 12 years old. slender, nervous, holding a mop and a tattered notebook. He looked like he didn't belong. Miss, he asked. They said you wanted to see the new janitor? Mila blinked. New janitor? He nodded. I just started. They told me you're the one who decides where I go. Mila's eyes flicked to the glowing platform beneath her feet, then to the files still open. A new profile had just been created. Marcus Alam, janitorial assistant, age 12, orphan, displaced by city redevelopment. No behavior data yet, just a blinking cursor next to a blank slate. Mila stepped forward and crouched in front of him. What do you want out of this place? She asked softly. The boy blinked. I dunno, he said honestly. Just somewhere that doesn't throw me out. Mila smiled slowly. Behind her, the observation lights pulsed gently, accepting him. Watching. And deep in the system's code, the AI flagged a new chain. Marcus Alam, observation, begin. Because in Lux Veritas, the cycle never truly ended. The cruel would always expose themselves. The kind would always rise. And every newcomer was another thread in the tower's living story. From a janitor who wasn't just a janitor, to a tenant who became a guardian, to a boy who might just be the next to carry the flame. The tower watched. The city buzzed. And the storm raged on. The storm rolled louder now, drumming against the glass like a warning. Mila led Marcus down the hidden stairwell from the 52nd floor. The boy clutched his mop like it was a sword, his eyes wide with nervous curiosity. Why is there a whole secret floor? He asked, glancing over his shoulder. Mila glanced down at him, her voice calm but sharp. Because sometimes power needs silence. And sometimes silence needs someone willing to listen. They reached the 50th floor, a level Marcus had no access to, and one Mila rarely visited. It was where the tower stored its invisible weight. Boxes of tenant grievances, files too sensitive for public legal review, and records of misconduct Theo had once handwritten, long before technology made it easier to track. Mila pushed open the door to Archive Room B. A cool, sterile light buzzed overhead. Rows of black filing cabinets stretched wall to wall, untouched by time. Marcus walked slowly between them. Who are these people? He asked, reading nameplates. Mila didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she walked to the far corner and retrieved a box labeled Evans Charles, Unit 17D. She opened it. Inside were photos, high-resolution security captures, and several reports from years past. Charles had once been a city lawyer, beloved by the media. But in Lux Veritas, his mask had slipped. Staff harassment, tenant threats, manipulation of younger interns. He'd been removed quietly in 2022. The media never knew. But the tower did. Marcus looked over the photos without fear, just deep, quiet thinking. You ever meet him? He asked. Mila shook her head. No. But Theo did. Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out a candy bar. It was half melted. He offered her the good end. She smiled but shook her head. Keep it. You're going to need the energy. Marcus leaned back against the metal cabinet. So what am I here for? Really? Am I being watched? Mila didn't lie. Yes. By who? Everyone. Even yourself. He looked confused. So she explained. This tower isn't just a building. It's a reflection. Some people walk into Lux Veritas and see gold, marble, status. Others walk in and see a chance to build something real. You won't be judged for what you have here, Marcus. You'll be judged for how you treat what you have. He considered that. Then, to her surprise, asked, How did you treat it? Mila hesitated, then slowly sat beside him on the cold floor. I almost ruined my chance, she admitted. I wanted to belong so badly, I nearly became like them. I started changing the way I spoke, the way I walked, the way I looked at people. Did it work? He asked. No, she said quietly. Not until I stopped pretending. Thunder cracked above them. A deep rumble vibrated through the building's bones. Marcus leaned forward, eyeing the files again. So, what happens to people like that lawyer guy? They disappear, Mila said. Not because we hurt them, but because truth does. The moment people see who you really are, your power vanishes. Marcus nodded slowly. Good. They deserve it. Mila turned to him. Some do. Some just need help. You have to learn the difference. There was a long silence. Then the boy asked, So am I a janitor? Or something else? Mila smiled. That depends, she said. Do you want to clean floors or clean the city? Marcus grinned. Both. They stood and left the archives, the door clicking shut behind them. And somewhere, buried deep in the tower's AI, Marcus Alam's profile updated again. Status, under assessment. Ethics level, unknown. Potential, high. Meanwhile, in a distant wing of the tower, Veronica Armand was holding court in her apartment, again. Only this time, no one was listening. Her influencer deals had gone quiet. Her PR firm had dropped her. Whispers were flying that her social engagement metrics were being quietly manipulated from inside Lux Veritas. She slammed her laptop shut and stood at her full-height mirror. Her reflection blinked. Once. Then again. Behind her, a barely visible red light blinked in the corner. A camera. Watching. Recording. She turned but found nothing. Still, something about the room felt thinner. Like the walls were aware. Like the tower was no longer tolerating her presence, but studying it. Her voice cracked as she whispered to herself. What are they planning? The answer? Everything. Because while Veronica schemed, and Marcus learned, and Mila watched, Theo was no longer alone. And Lux Veritas? It was only now revealing its teeth. Rain poured harder over the glistening skin of Lux Veritas Tower. Thunder no longer just echoed across the sky. It shook the steel bones of the city itself. Cars moved slower below. The lights of penthouses flickered on like anxious eyes staying awake in fear of what came next. Inside the tower, something had shifted. Theo stood alone on level 13, a floor the tenants never accessed and the elevator never listed. It was unfinished on purpose. Exposed beams. Concrete walls. No polished tiles or scented hallways. Just truth. Truth was all Theo cared about now. The room before him was simple. An open space with nothing but a chair in the center, facing a blank screen mounted on the wall. But as Theo walked forward, the screen flickered to life. His face appeared, not in real time, but in footage from months ago. He watched himself scrub the lobby floor as tenants stormed past him with coffee and contempt. He watched himself endure. Watch himself test. Watch himself choose. The room around him came alive. Screens on every wall played silent clips. Snapshots from the lives of Lux Veritas tenants. Dax Huntley stealing his intern's pitch. Veronica mocking the disabled doorman on level 3. Daniel bribing building inspectors with vintage whiskey and hotel weekend packages. A tower of luxury, rotting from within. Theo turned slowly, the screen surrounding him like a jury of truth. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black remote. There were 3 buttons. Review. Remove. Rebuild. He pressed none. Not yet. Back in the east wing of the building, Mila walked Marcus through a side entrance to the rooftop gardens. Now officially his first assignment as a janitor. But he had questions. Always did. Why do rich people think they can't be touched? Marcus asked, trimming leaves carefully. Mila smiled gently. Because for a long time they couldn't. Everyone else was too afraid to lose the little they had. But you're not afraid. I used to be, she admitted. Then I met a janitor who wasn't really a janitor. And I realized something. What? That sometimes you don't need to start a revolution. You just need to be the one who stays clean in a dirty world. Eventually, people notice. Marcus seemed to consider this. Then he asked, so what happens now? Mila looked out over the city. Now, we make sure they know we noticed. At that very moment, Theo sat back in the lone chair on level 13. He pressed the review button. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. Ruth LaSalle. He answered. They've called a secret board meeting, she said. Daniel wants to force a controlling vote. I expected that, Theo replied calmly. He's promising investors a full rebrand. Claims the tower's too outdated. Says it needs a new face, younger vision, faster turnover. And more corruption, Theo said. He's got the votes. Not all of them. Ruth hesitated. We're ready, Theo. But we need something more than morality. We need leverage. Theo leaned forward. I've already built it. How? He smiled faintly. By giving them every opportunity to show who they really are. And they took it. On camera. In reports. In contracts. And I filed every single one into the tower's ethics system. Every tenant is now scored. And once I press release, their reputations won't belong to them anymore. Ruth's breath caught. Will it destroy them? No, Theo said. It'll give them a choice, change or leave. In the shadows of the control room, he pressed the second button, remove. A gentle vibration shivered through the tower. Nothing flashy. Nothing loud. Just systematic. Within seconds, Daniel's personal elevator access revoked. Veronica's social media privileges rerouted through Lux Veritas's private firewall, throttled, restricted, monitored. Dax Huntley's mentorship privileges frozen. And across the building, soft chimes sounded as multiple tenants received an anonymous email. Your presence in Lux Veritas is under review. Please report to the main auditorium at 7 p.m. sharp. Attendance is not optional. Marcus watched the notice pop up on Mila's phone. He blinked. What's happening at 7? Mila smiled. Accountability. Far below, Daniel sat in his corner office, sipping from a glass of whiskey, when his screens all went black for a full 5 seconds. Then, one by one, they lit back up with a countdown. 06:45:02. 06:45:01. The timer to 7 p.m. had begun. Daniel stood slowly, setting his glass down. He wasn't in control anymore. And for the first time, he knew it. Back in the control room, Theo stared at the third and final button. Rebuild. But he didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, he rose, picked up his coat, and left the room. Because the final decision wouldn't be his alone. It would be theirs. Of those who stayed. Of those who learned. Of those who proved, even in the shadows of gold towers, that dignity still had a place in the city. As thunder cracked one final time, Lux Veritas prepared to show the world what justice looked like. Not with weapons or noise, but with quiet truth, undeniable and unafraid. And the janitor? He was no longer just testing. He was choosing.